Hi, I'm Justine Louise. Welcome to my channel. So today I am on part 4 of my 5 series on the Kruger National Park. If you haven't seen my others, they're going to be in the put them linked below, sorry, of other items. So it's a huge topic, and what we've done is we've broken them down into smaller segments so that if there's just one particular part that you're interested in, you can just watch that part. So I've kind of labeled them based on topic. So today's topic is basically the Kruger National Park tips, tricks, and frequently asked questions. Every time my husband and I mention that we're going on safari, we get so many questions from friends and family, and they want to know more about it because it seems to be a lot of people's bucket list item. Not necessarily the Kruger Park, but definitely going on a safari. So my husband and I have actually been on this safari probably, I think this might be our 10th year. We're going to be going next month, so this is all kind of fresh in my mind right now, so that's why I thought it would be a good time to film. My husband is from South Africa, and when we first got married, he used to tell me stories about when he was a kid and they would travel to the Kruger Park as a family vacation. And for me, it was just seems so crazy, where in North America we tend to go camping or at Disneyland, Mexico, and that sort of thing. So his family vacation was typically to the Kruger Park on a safari. And I said, oh, is there any chance that maybe we could go? And he said, yeah, why not? So we planned it as a trip of a lifetime, and we loved it so much it then changed to an annual trip. So we're quite fortunate to be able to do that. We have missed a couple years here and there, but for the most part we tend to go every single year. So based on my experience and things that I have learned along the way and our experiences, I thought I would share them with you in case this was something that you might be thinking of doing, and I would just want to give you any hints and help and information that I possibly can. When we first booked our trip over 10 years ago, we had to do everything by fax. There was no photos of the accommodations. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just kind of going based on my husband's memory from when he was a kid. So we did have that little bit of help, but for the most part it was a shot in the dark. So it has now evolved, and now you can do everything on the internet, which is great, and there's TripAdvisor, which is always a great resource. So anyway, I just thought I would try and give you as much information as possible. So the first thing is flying in and out of the game park. We fly to Johannesburg, and we come from Canada, so we end our journey in South Africa at Johannesburg, and from there you could either drive into the park, which some people do, is they rent a vehicle, and it's I think about a 5 or 6 hour drive. My husband does not want to do that. After that 2-day journey, the last thing he wants to do is a 6 hour drive, and he is from South Africa and he just doesn't feel it's very safe. So we go the safest possible route, and that is flying directly into the park to the Skukuza airport. That way you land actually inside the game reserve. There's no driving outside the park, and it's easy, and especially after a long journey, you're right at your accommodation and can get some sleep. We did in the past fly to Kruger Mpumalanga Airport, and it was about a 45-minute drive. And again, we could rent our vehicle right from that airport, same as at Skukuza. There's a lot of major car rentals there. We usually book with EBATES, but if you go online, you'll see what other ones are available. I don't think there's a lot of them in Skukuza, but at the Kruger Mpumalanga Airport, there are a lot, because that is in the town of Nelspruit, so it's a little bit bigger. We have also flown out of Hoedspruit and out of Phalaborwa, and again you can rent vehicles from there and then drive into the park. But for us, we just prefer flying into Skukuza now. And also keep in mind, there aren't a lot of flights every day, so bear that in mind if you're coming from an international flight into Johannesburg to time it, or you may have to stay overnight in Johannesburg, which is something we try to avoid. So we try and land as early as possible in Johannesburg, and then that way we have quite a few options to fly into the Kruger in the day. I do have a full video on how to book the Kruger Park, and it's thorough, explaining everything. We book everything through the Sanparks website. Don't be fooled when you type in Kruger Park. There are so many websites titled Kruger Park, but they are external companies trying to pretend that they are the Kruger. Another one that tends to fool a lot of people is people say that their accommodations are located inside the Kruger Park, and they are in fact not. So if you want to stay physically inside the park, you must book through Sanparks or stay at a Sanparks accommodation, and they are main camps, bush camps, and there's also luxury lodges. Other than that, it's people just pretending, and don't be fooled. We ended up staying at a place, it was called Marloth Park, and it was a 45-minute drive to the Kruger Park, so we were extremely irritated by that, especially when you want to get in, be on the road at sunrise, so then that meant an extra 45 minutes for us to have to get up, so it was extremely irritating. Plus, we enjoy being inside the park because of the sounds, and when we wake up we can hear hyenas and lions and the birds, and it's just a little bit different than staying outside of the park. So I'll touch a little bit on that later, but for us, we like to stay inside the park, so please don't be fooled by that. There are gas stations inside the park. They're few and far between, so always make sure you keep on top of your gas gauge, and all the gas stations are cash, so make sure you always have a bit of cash with you. I know people always travel with cash anyway, so I don't need to tell you that, but filling a gas tank tends to be around $100 Canadian dollars, so you need a substantial amount of cash to cover all your gas for the entire trip. And part of another trick that I want to mention, at the gate they sell these nifty books. They're just map books, and they probably don't seem very interesting, but I buy one every time we go. I only have 3 left because I tend to give them to people when we get back home, because so many people have questions about the Kruger Park, and there's so much information inside here. There's maps, information, as I mentioned, gas stations. It'll tell you where there's ATMs. It gives you all the camp opening and closing times. There's also a table in here to give you information how long it would take to drive from one camp to another. Because the camps open and close at certain times, you do not want to be late and miss out arriving at your camp on time, because you'll get in big trouble for that. So make sure you time yourself accordingly. If you're checking out of one camp and moving to another, make sure you've given yourself enough time to get to that other camp, especially if it's a long distance. The Kruger Park is about 20,000 square kilometers, so some people don't know and they think, oh, I'll stay up there and then down here the next day. Well, that's too long of a drive. It may seem like it's not that far, but the kilometer-an-hour speed limits are between 30 and 50. It's 30 on dirt roads, 50 on tar, so you need to keep that in mind as well. But there are tables inside here to give you the times that it would take to get to someplace, incorporating those speed limits. There is also, which is quite fun, that we like to look at, is photos of all the species of animals that are in the park. The artist depictions aren't always the best. We're kind of scratching our head by some of the pictures that they have, but we also use this as a reference when we're driving around and we come across, in particular, antelopes that we aren't familiar with. We quickly look through the book to see which one it could possibly be, and it's kind of a bit of a game, and it's quite fun. So I highly recommend getting these books. They're in the gift stores as well as at the camp gates, and they have them in a multitude of languages as well. I was just thinking this morning, I'm not sure if I've ever seen any Asian languages. I'll take a look when I go this time, but I've seen Dutch, English, French, German, Afrikaans. I've seen a ton of them, so I think they have a lot of that covered, but again, I haven't seen Asian, so that's one thing I should double check on. There are ATMs, but again, they're few and far between. They're usually at the main rest camps, but not all the rest camps. So again, in this book, it will tell you if there's an ATM at certain camps. They kind of give you all the information what every camp has to offer, because these are all the Sanparks accommodations. As I was mentioning, there's people that will trick you. These are all the accommodations that are in the inside the Kruger Park, unless they're private luxury lodges. As far as safety, I've touched on this a little bit in another video, but I will mention again, safety as far as safety from theft and humans. We have always felt 100% safe. One of the things when you drive into the park, everybody has to declare themselves and give a passport, and they will also go through your vehicle. There's spot checks on vehicles, checking for alcohol, and they also are checking obviously for poaching. So they're pretty thorough on checking everybody. So I don't think people that are going in there just for theft reasons are going to go through all that rigmarole and have their identification looked at and all that kind of stuff. So we always feel extremely, extremely safe in there as far as human problems. And also with theft, we have never had any issues. My husband carries extremely expensive camera equipment with him, and that is in our accommodations. And the accommodations aren't super fancy deadbolt locks that you see in North America in hotel rooms. Sometimes it's a sliding glass door with a latch. And we've never once felt threatened, had anything go missing. Same with the cleaning staff. We've never had any issues. Although we've never had issues in any country, knock wood, but just I know some places people have had issues with theft in hotel rooms, and we've never had any problems like that, and I've never felt suspicious or threatened in any way. As far as animals in the camp, you should never be concerned about wild animals entering. There is electric fence all around the camps. There's gates, and there's a gate guard, as well as the cattle grates, so animals can't walk through. I have heard of stories from many, many years ago of this and that happening. There's called Kruger tales in this book I read, and there has been incidents, you know, where a leopard may jump over the fence and things like that, but I've never heard of it since we've been going there, and these are things from many, many years ago, and possibly could be wives' tales. I don't know. So we've never felt threatened in that way. There are, however, animals inside the camp. It is the bush, so there's sometimes small reptiles, there's a lot of birds, and there are a lot of monkeys. And as cute and as adorable as they are, they can be quite vicious, and they're after food. So please be aware there's also signage everywhere making sure that you don't ever feed the animals, tease them or bother them, and they'll stay out of your way if you stay out of their way. They're wonderful to watch, but please keep your distance. We have had baboons break into our place, and they're quite terrifying. So just always be aware, and they are wild animals, so keep your distance. I have noticed sometimes parents allow their children to go and chase and bug, and they're just asking for trouble. So anyway, please keep that in mind. The temperatures, we've gone at various different times. We tend to like to go in February because we like to escape our cold weather, and because it's a low time in the Kruger Park. It's not their school holidays. That tends to be really, really busy. So when we go, it tends to be a lot of international visitors, and we're usually pretty good at getting our accommodation and things. If you go at peak times, it's very difficult to get accommodations and everything's busy. So we like to go in February, and it is extremely hot. Like I'm talking, some days are 48 degrees. So be prepared. So bring sunscreen, proper clothing for that, and just cool, comfortable things, a hat. And again, sunscreen, like I mentioned, and keep hydrated. So it's just typical hot, hot weather, and just be prepared for that. We have also gone in May, and because it is desert-like, the evenings and mornings are freezing, and the rooms aren't really accommodating for those kind of temperatures like what we're used to in North America with our gas furnaces and things. So it does tend to be a bit chilly, and if you're going on a safari in an open-air vehicle, make sure you bring lots of layers, warm clothing. When we went out on a safari vehicle, I was actually wearing a toque and gloves, a thick hoodie sweater. We took a blanket from our room, and we were still quite cold. So keep that in mind. It can get quite cold, and they seem to promote outdoorsy things. A lot of the dinners are held outdoors. If you're going to a luxury lodge, a lot of the restaurants are outdoors. So even though the weather might be a little bit cool in the mornings and evenings, they still have everything outside. So make sure you bring something, a light sweater or something for the evenings if they get a bit cool. So that's my experience with that. And also bring a raincoat. Just a soft shell is fine. We've had a couple of rainy times, and I just want something nice and light and easy. Now you're probably wondering about toilets. Some of the drives we go on, we can be out for 5 or 6 hours and obviously there's no toilets in the bush. And you don't want to get out of your vehicle to go to the toilet in the bush because there could be a lion around any corner. So there are a lot of picnic spots throughout the Kruger Park, not just in the main rest camps, and they're all identified in these map books. So maybe when you're preparing your journey the night before, that's what we like to do, is look at the map and see where we're going to go the next day and plan our route, which is kind of a fun thing to do in the evenings. You can also look at where toilets are, so you can coordinate your beverages around that and how much you're going to drink, because you don't know how long it's going to be till you get a bathroom break. So there are toilets, but they're few and far between, and they're basically at the rest camps as well as the picnic spots. So, but there are toilets available. So there is food. There's quite a few restaurants. There's restaurants in all the main camps, varying from takeaways, hot dog kind of hamburger stand kind of things, and some of the camps have fine dining. There's even a cattle baron that's at Skakuza, which is kind of like the Keg to us, or maybe Outback Steakhouse kind of thing if you're familiar. A nice steakhouse, and we always really enjoy going there for a nice treat. I've mentioned in one of my other videos, we have kind of gone through lots of different cycles of restaurants in the 10 or plus years we've been going there. The first few years that we went, the restaurants were run by Sanparks, and the service was lacking, to say the least, and they tend to be out of a lot of the items. Keeping in mind they are in the bush, so all the food has to be transported in. So they don't always have the freshest ingredients and able to access a lot of the items. So be prepared that sometimes when you order something, you may have to have 3 or 4 backups because they might not have it. A few years ago, all the restaurants ended up being closed, and they were doing renovations and putting in some franchises. And that was kind of a controversial thing. Some people wanted to keep it rustic the way it was, and then there was some people, tourists, including myself, that wanted some nice restaurants to go to, let's put it that way. And they did do that, and we slowly watched the service on that slowly decline. And again, I think the big issue is trying to get the product into the park, because it is a game reserve and it's quite far from any major cities. So I've now heard that they've pulled out all these lovely franchise restaurants, with the exception, I think, of 1 or 2. So when we go in February, it's going to be a surprise what they have available as far as restaurants. I heard that some of the camps had just kind of set up makeshift kind of takeaway things. I'm not quite sure. So we'll see when we get there. So we always just kind of go with the flow and have an open mind. Don't go there for the food and expecting fine dining. You are in the bush, and it kind of is what it is. Most of the rest camps, the accommodations offer self-catering, whether you have a kitchenette inside your accommodation, or they also have communal kitchens that you can share with the campers, and they have hot plates, microwaves, and basic rudimentary kitchens where you can make your own food. And every one of the rondavels and campgrounds have a barbecue, or braai as it's called in South Africa, and so you can prepare a barbecue every day if you like as well. We do that sometimes, but in 48 degrees it's sometimes a hard push for me to get my husband to go out there and start cooking over a barbecue, and I can't say I blame him. So that's when we tend to go to the restaurant or for the takeaway. And to get the food to prepare, there is a gift shop in most of the main rest camps. Some are bigger than others, where you can get basic supplies, including fresh ingredients, meat and vegetables and things. But again, it's not always the freshest, and it's hard for them to keep inventory. So keep that in mind. So don't expect to be able to prepare a full salad or a full meal. They don't always have everything, but they do have a large selection of canned goods and basics to get you through. What my husband and I usually do is go to one of the main grocery stores just outside of the park. There's a few that are just a 5 or 10 minute drive, and they're the main super center grocery stores, and that's what we prefer to do. We buy a cooler when we're there, fill the cooler with some fresh foods, and there's lots of choice and selection. They're typical big superstore, grocery stores. So that's tend to what we do, and then just for little bits and bobs that we need, then we'll rely on the gift stores inside the Kruger. So there's lots of different options for food, so I think everything pretty much would be covered for there. There are gift stores in the main rest camps, as I mentioned, so they do sell some basic food items. They do also sell alcohol. In previous years, anybody could buy alcohol if you were of age, but they've now changed that you're not allowed to buy alcohol if you're just a day visitor. So if you're just coming into the camp just to check it out or come there for a picnic or something to eat, you can't buy bottles of alcohol. You have to be an overnight visitor only, and I'm not quite sure what the theory is behind that. Perhaps drinking and driving. They're assuming if you're coming for the day, then you're going to drink a bottle of wine and then go out driving, which is not a good thing. So anyway, just keep that in mind, but they do sell alcohol, and then they also have beautiful giftware. I always enjoy going through the gift stores. They have such neat stuff. Skakuza in particular is a huge gift store, and they have local handmade handicrafts. Some of the things are made in China, which are pretty obvious, but they do have some beautiful pieces for your home, for gifts, souvenirs, and just really fun things I always really enjoy going through and having a look at. And they do also started carrying some clothes. So I mentioned in one of my videos that one year our luggage didn't arrive, and I was panicking because I was wearing full wool clothing, and I arrived in 48-degree weather and I couldn't buy any clothes, with the exception of souvenir Kruger Park t-shirts. But now they do have a selection of clothing of local South African fashions, and I always pick up one or two items from there too. So we like to be first at the gate. So as I mentioned, every one of the camps has electric fence around the camp, and they shut it all down at sunset, and they open it up again at sunrise. So once you're in the camp at sunset, that's it. It's closed. Nobody's getting in or out unless there's a medical emergency. So when we like to be the first people at the gate, or should I say my husband loves to be the first person at the gate, because then he gets the choice of what road he wants to take. And sometimes what's happened is the night before, when we've gone for an evening drive or late afternoon drive, we've come across a pride of lions, let's say, and we think, well, maybe in the morning they might still be there. Lions are our favorite, so it could be anything, but lions in particular. So we're always on the hunt for a lion. So we like to be the first to the gate, and then that way we can head off to that area that we saw the night before. Or he just likes to think, it's always a gamble. You think, well, if we go this way or that way, what might we stumble upon? And what happens is in the night, that's when a lot of these hunters come out, hunters meaning animal hunters, come out, and that's when they do all their hunting, and then they like to relax and lay on the tar roads because they're nice and hot, and they have their little bit of a snooze. So many times we've stumbled upon lions laying on the tar roads. You are only allowed to travel on the tar roads or the dirt roads. If you see an animal off-road, I know they do it in safari vehicles when you watch on television, and at luxury lodges they'll drive off the road 4x4 and then come directly up to the animal, but that is illegal there, so you can only stay on the road. So you may see this magnificent lion way off in the distance, but you have to stay on the tar road. So if we can stumble upon lions or some sort of exciting animal on the road, it's such a huge treat. So we like to be first out, and it has now gotten to the stage where we'll go out there at about 4 in the morning to be first in line, and it's a race. And when we see other people's lights on in their places, we're speeding to get ready. We're like, they could be going. Or you hear an engine start, we rush out to make sure that we're first. So it's a bit of a game, and it's always quite fun. And we're there an hour and a half early, I know, and we sit there and we wait, and we usually just bring computer games or things like that, or we get out and listen to the bush and the sounds, because sometimes you can hear animals in the distance, which is always really fun. My husband brings his flashlight, and we kind of look and see if we can see anything, and we bring our coffee and rusks. So it's quite a pleasant time in the morning. The sun is just starting to rise. So we really enjoy it. I know some people are there on holiday and they like to sleep in. You will see animals throughout the day no matter what, but the peak times for especially animals that hunt, they're usually nocturnal, they're up all night, and then they go hide and sleep in the day, and they're very difficult to find. So that's when we like to look, and also we find in the afternoons it's just so hot and a lot of the animals are hiding and resting. So the morning for us is the peak time, so we want to be first. So I shouldn't actually be passing that information in case we have to start fighting you for the spots. So a lot of the rest camps have pools. So you can always go for a swim. So I always recommend bringing beach towels. We have stayed outside of the park at luxury lodges and it's been wonderful, but we always prefer to stay inside the park because we like doing what we want, when we want, and doing the self-drive. If you'd like me to do another video on reviews on luxury lodges, I'd be happy to do that, but I will keep that as a separate video because it has nothing really to do with the Kruger Park. And as I mentioned before, there's two types of roads. There's tar and then there's gravel. And the tar roads pretty much are meant to be used to get A to B from different camps. And then the gravel roads are 30 kilometers an hour, and those are kind of the windy ones where you tend to find a lot of the animals. The animals don't tend to be on the tar roads, especially in the day because of all the traffic. There's lots of big heavy trucks that are transporting things in and out of the park. You don't need four-wheel drive. I know a lot of safari places you want four-wheel drive, but you can't go off-road, so there's really no use for it. We have been there before when there's been a bit of flooding. We tend to always hire vehicles like trucks or SUVs, just so we're a little bit higher so you can see further out in the bush. That's what we tend to do. My niece and nephew went and they rented one of those tiny little cars and they were so low down, so we like to be high and then you get a better view. Same as the safari vehicles, you see they're high, usually Land Rovers. My husband also downloaded something that's called Maps Me, and that way you can use it offline for navigation. That way you can see some of the roads offline, so you don't need to use Wi-Fi, and it's free. And what we like to use it for is to time ourselves to make sure that we get back to the camp on time, because you do not want to be late. If you're late, you get a fine, and if you're habitually late, I've heard that they actually ban people from the Kruger. So anyway, I think in a nutshell, those are kind of my tips. There is also medical facilities if ever you run into an issue. I thought I should mention that. I think the main one is at Skakuza. So if you ever do need a doctor, there is one available there, and they always ask doctors to identify themselves if they're staying in one of the camps because there aren't many doctors around. So just be aware that that's available. And I also would recommend buying a wild card. You have to pay a daily conservation fee, and it's a lot cheaper if you buy it as a wild card, depending how long you're going for. My husband and I go for a month, so for us to pay a daily conservation fee ends up being more money than buying a yearly pass wild card. So weigh up the pros and cons for that, and that is on the Sanparks website, the main Sanparks website. So definitely look into that. And if you are staying outside of the park, you would enter through the main gates, and you would do that every day when you arrive. So they tend to be quite busy, and sometimes they even stop off allowing people in because the gates are then full. But that's usually around holiday season. So anyway, I hope this helped you. This is just kind of a couple of FAQs of questions I get from a lot of friends when they hear I'm going to the Kruger. So if you enjoyed this, please click like. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them below if I've missed anything. And if you're going to the Kruger, I hope you have a wonderful time. And thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more travel videos, please hit subscribe and the notification bell. And I hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.